Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the virtual launch of Born Freeloaders by Phumlani Pikoli. My name is Sithembile Mbete, and I am a senior lecturer at the University of Pretoria, and I will be having a chat with Phumlani today about his book. I'd just like to remind you all that we won't be able to hear you during this conversation because you won't be able to speak to us directly, but we would love to get all of your questions and comments. So please would you send questions to us using either the Q&A function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, or the chat function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring both of those to get your questions as Phumlani and I chat. We'll start off with a conversation of about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So please do send in the questions using the Q&A or the chat. The bookstores are also now open. One of the joys of level 4 of the lockdown is that all the bookstores are open, so you can go into any of the major bookstores to get a copy of the book. Of course, you can still order it online. All of the e-commerce is selling all of their goods, so you can order it online or get a Kindle go to Kindle or go to Kobo to get an ebook if you'd like to do that. Pan Macmillan will be putting links in the chat for you to get access to where you can buy the book. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining us. I see the participants are filling up, but without further ado, I'm just going to start. Hi Phumlani.
Hey Stay, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm okay. It's a little bit nerve-wracking doing this digitally.
I know, right? So, because we had our in-person session in Pretoria at the Exclusive Books in Brooklyn at the start of March, and within, 3 weeks or just over 3 weeks, we were all on lockdown. It's very weird how quickly the world has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we slid in just in time.
I know. Yeah, so hi, it's nice to see you digitally, and it's amazing to talk about your book, Born Freeloaders, which is excellent, nice, which is your debut novel. Your last book, The Fatuous State of Severity, was a collection of short stories, which is also there, very nice. That's the one with the yellow cover.
Subtle product placement.
Was a collection of short stories, but this is a novel following a group of young people in Pretoria that is amazingly set in Pretoria. So for everyone who's watching, Phumlani and I know each other from way back, and we spent a lot of time living in Cape Town together. Because he's friends with my brother. And so one of my experiences of reading this book was how similar the characters and some of the experiences were, because I could remember some of the real life events I think that you were drawing from. But what was very weird for me was the Pretoria setting. I'm a Joburg girl. And so the distance between Joburg and Pretoria is large, symbolically.
Yeah.
And so I was so surprised by the Pretorianness of this book. In many ways, Pretoria is another character in the book. There's a deep Pretoria sensibility, everything from the amount of Afrikaans that you use, so whether it's the teachers at school and what they say and how they address people, but also the Afrikaans colloquialisms that are used in everyday language. Can you chat to me a bit more about the Pretoria sensibility of the book?
Yeah, Pretoria is a weird place, and you know, the characters are of this like crazy transitionary, or like the first phase of like this transitionary period of democracy. And so one is born in 1990 and one is born in 94. So those are literal landmark sort of years for the characters to be born into. And I said, I'm putting it in Pretoria. I mean, it's the capital city, and so there is a lot of like sort of concentrated nat power that was there, and for sort of the first generation of Black kids to sort of have to navigate. So I thought that it was really important to sort of ground it in that, because I think, you know, we do get lost in the stories of cosmopolitan sort of reality for middle class kids in either Cape Town or Joburg. And the country's just a little bit bigger than that. So yeah, and Afrikaans is within the fiber of South Africa. You know, there are more Afrikaans speakers than there are English speakers. You know, so it was sort of really important to shake up the assumed sensibilities of what it means to be a middle class Black South African. And the ways in which that actually manifests when there's proximity to political power.
Yes. Thanks for ending with that, because it brings me to my next question and conversation, because one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about this book is that it's following, as you've described it, a bunch of Black middle class kids, privileged kids, who've really been the beneficiaries of the democratic order, or the post-1994 order, through a series of parties and love's life drama and existential crisis.
Yeah. Backstage on steroids.
Exactly. But you write about their experience with very little shame or embarrassment, because so often that sort of coconut experience is embarrassing, and people sort of talk about it in whispers or whatever, and it comes with a lot of discomfort. So one of the things that I found so remarkable about the book was how you talk about those experiences and that privilege so openly and without shame. Was that a deliberate move?
I think so. To a certain extent, I think that needed to be done for the characters to remain interesting, and especially for them to navigate the world that they were in. So I think, you know, there's this idea, especially when there's concentrated Afrikaans populations, that the political power structures sort of demonetize the Black experience, and especially within these sort of privileged spaces. And I think it was super important to have these characters be able to own their own spaces, because, you know, because they felt entitled to be in those, and, you know, they had been in racially integrated sort of settings from the beginning of their lives. And so it was important to have them as, you know, like great stakeholders of their positions, and the positions that they occupy. Their reflections of Blackness are a little bit more hard-hitting, or just a little bit more intensely scrutinized.
Yeah. And the experiences are, this is definitely not a universal Black experience, right? But certainly there is a generation of young Black born frees, or generation and a few, those who were born just a few years before, who will find resonance with a lot of what's in the book. And one of the things I remember from when we were having our in-person launch and discussion was how many of the parents were saying that the book had been a revelation for them, because it told them things about their children's experience that they hadn't, thought about or imagined. Can you tell us a bit about that, about what the generational conversation has been that you've been able to spark with this?
Yeah, it's been super, super interesting because there's this sort of idea that amongst Black families, there's a suppression of expression, and that there's a hierarchy, and there's a completely humble way to sort of approach things and sort of dress them up and never directly address them, which I guess a novel is a nice way to pick up on the metaphorical language, but also it also gives opportunity and space for them to actually enter those spaces that they wouldn't have had any sort of opportunity to. A lot of Black parents, for instance, the white schooling spaces, especially Model C or private schooling spaces, would have still been inaccessible for them and their children, because they would have been working when everyone else's mom was at the tuck shop or watching the first team game. And again, with these political proximities, there's the overreaching idea that the parents are missing, but the parents are missing to go and build this new country. And so that was also, I think, quite interesting that came out of the chat that we had in Pretoria was, one of my mom's friends was, I think, asked, did they let us down by putting the country first and being sort of going missing? And it's one of those, you're like, hey man, there's a whole country. I don't have a country to to participate in if you're not working for it. So
yeah. I think she was the one who described her son saying that it was like the country was the favorite child in the family. And that there was a sense that the parents were choosing between both of them.
Which is like a direct echo of what one of the characters says in the book. He's like, the nice thing about having the country as your favorite child, as the favorite child, is that your parents are never around.
Exactly.
The
character who says that is Xolani, who has this interesting relationship with his uncle.
No, it's Kanye Caesar, actually.
Is it? Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. But what I wanted to talk about is Xolani, actually, because I find that the conversation between him and his uncle is so reflective of the intergenerational conversation that many of us are having. What motivated that? And all of those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's, with Black family structures, especially when you're a kid, there's this assumed sort of idea that you can't understand what people are saying about you, even though you're sort of in the room. And then, then you grow up with a different sensibility and a different worldview. And so those begin to clash more openly. And so there's definitely a lot of dismissal that goes on. And I wanted to explore with Uncle Zweli that bitterness, and if I was in that position, like, what could I say to hurt this kid and jar him into like wanting to actually explore his identity and know it even more. So there was definitely a lot of projection in terms of the way that I think a lot of us view our parents viewing us, and trying to then also balance that out with the awareness of being Black, but then also feeling like you're completely disjointed from it for not having deeper cultural sort of ties, or being able to fluently express cultural connection and and language. So that was definitely the thing that I was going for in that relationship.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, there's also, I think a lot of the tension that exists between, that existed between our parents or parents like ours and us in our late teens and early 20s, I suppose until the mid 20s, is that when they were our age, they were making existential life or death decisions about the politics of the country.
Yeah.
And we were wanting to go clubbing or worried about a boy or a girl liking us, you know, so that the frivolousness, I think, that we've been privileged to have in a lot of our upbringing has been a point of tension.
Definitely.
And possible resentment. I think that, you know, the thing about Uncle Zweli is that he seems to resent his friends.
But I think there's also like an element of just grouchiness. Of just getting old, because I was actually thinking about this last night. And, you know, each generation believes they're the one, you know, and I was also, then I started thinking back to our parents' generation. They'd have been rocking the boat with their parents. Their parents would have wanted them to sort of be staying in line, like toe the line, just get things done, like, you know, just keep your head down. But these guys are like, no, I'm going to pick up a gun and I'm going to try and, you know, fight these guys. So there's also definitely a rude awakening in sort of that. And so with each generation, there have to be, you know, seismic sort of antagonisms and paradigm shifts that everybody has to like, that we depend on in order to in any way grow and progress. So I think there's also an element of Uncle Zweli just being comfortable and no longer having the energy of youth to fight and whatever. And now he just wants to sort of dictate. And Phumlani and Nthabiseng being a reflection of a world that he fought for but doesn't understand. And because he doesn't want to understand, he wants to sort of retreat into comfort and sort of watch it go or like try and direct it, you know? And it's like, that's not how it works.
And look, and I think the reality also is that you know, the promise of freedom turned out not to be as sweet, I think, as people that fought for it expected it to be. Either from realizing their own limitations or being left outside of structures of power or the compromises that were made. So that the temptation to direct what subsequent generations will do is then very high, you know?
Yeah. And because also you've just put everything on the line for this like one idea and then it doesn't turn out exactly the way that you hoped. I always like think of, you know, Nelly and the sacrifices he made, you know, sacrificing the prime of his life and then coming back to basically not having one until his death, you know. So that's solitude, that like that concentrated level of solitude then just completely went the other way when he came out. And I always think about the I was actually speaking to my girlfriend, and she had this reflection about, you know, he's like this boy from Kunu, and he's flying halfway across the world, and he, you know, sees what he would have considered would have been Eskimo children, Inuit children, and they know who he is, and they know about the the liberation movement. And so there's a very weird thing about fighting for an ideal, because reaching it is a very, very, I guess, double-edged sword. Because if you get what you actually want, there's a lot that you sort of have to then sacrifice for that.
Definitely. But also that the ideal then gets tainted by reality.
Yeah.
Because ideals are perfect, right? And reality really isn't. I want to ask one more question before we open up. Please, guys, write your questions either in the Q&A or the chat that you'd like to ask Phumlani about the book or about his writing. If you'd like to ask questions about Fatuous State of Sorority as well, feel free. So this is your first novel, and I want to get a sense of your experience of writing a novel, having gone from the short story form to writing fiction in long form. And I want to know also about your use of different sort of devices. So one of the devices you use is this allegory that sort of forms this thread throughout the novel. What was that about? Why did you feel like you had to do that? What idea were you trying to sort of keep going throughout the book? And are you going to write another one?
Writing a novel was definitely a lot harder than doing the short stories, because the short stories you can sort of dip in and out. And so, whenever you're writing, like for me, writing anything, I need to sort of really experience it. I need to feel all those feels, and then and that's how then you try and express it and you put it forward so that other people can try and get there with you. So now having to stay within like consistent characters who are going through, teenage and early adulthood angst. I was listening to a lot of Lana Del Rey, a lot of Block Party, a lot of Mac Miller, rest in peace. Just to sort of like get down there, and just and look at me like, I'm so young and there's so much out there for me, but I'm sad about it. And sort of to stay there. The use of allegory I thought was super important, because I think that speaks to the way in which our languages are. The African languages, well, particularly South African languages, because that's the greatest exposure I have, are super figurative. And especially as Xhosa is made up of sort of different, what would talk about as literary devices in English. But it's so figurative, and the metaphors can be extended into one conversation that could go on for years as a metaphor. So I thought it was like super important to have that allegory running through with this, because it was actually being told by Uncle Zweli. It had been imparted on them because on Ntsabi and Xolani, because they didn't really speak any of their home languages, and so for them then to have this clash with English. So they're living these English lives, but there's this allegory that's running with them. And so for them at different points in their lives to keep on going back to it, be like, oh, okay, so that's what that meant, or that's how that looks like, which actually happens at the dinner scene in the last part.
Yeah. That idea of alienation from home language, I think, is definitely something that our generation and subsequent are dealing with, about how do you express who you are and your identity when you are alienated from the language of that identity.
Yeah.
And that's something that I see sort of play out in the book. Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely, because language is the way in which you interpret the world. And quite often, as much as English might be your the best language you speak, falling into this group, it's still not your first language.
Yeah,
exactly. Your first language is language from home. And so those sensibilities and those understandings of reality of the world are still then miles apart, and trying to reconcile that is still quite the effort.
Definitely. My mom always used to shout at me when I was younger, because she used to say that she used to hate it when I speak to her in English. She'd say she preferred it if I spoke in isiZulu because I was rude in English.
Yeah.
So and I couldn't sense the difference, right? But to
Yeah.
her, my whole demeanor was different when I engaged with her in English than isiZulu. Which is, there's a question here from Veronica saying, do you think this book could translate into a good play? And have you thought of screenwriting? Because this would make a good series.
Yes, I definitely have thought about adapting it into a different medium. And I never thought about it as a play, but this is actually the second time that it's coming up.
Really? Okay.
As a play on stage, and I'm still trying to, because I'm also like a playwright, so I'm still trying to see it on stage and how it would be adapted to the stage. But yeah, I think that would be live. That definitely I want to I want to put it into another medium.
Incredible. It would also be a great TV series. I mean, even like a mini series type vibe.
Yeah, Normally from Soweto said that, and there's also this TV series that's coming on. Is it Netflix that everybody's hyped about?
Yes, with the school, ne?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So perhaps they're blazing the trail.
Amazing. There's another conversation here from Bobby about, because we know we've been speaking about seismic and sort of paradigm shifts when we were speaking earlier about this generation that you speak about in the book. And she's saying, would COVID be a new seismic or paradigm shift that minimizes the generation clash? What do you think your characters would be feeling or thinking today, whether here in Joburg or in Pretoria?
Yeah, I mean, COVID has definitely dragged people who thought they could just talk about the fourth industrial revolution until the return of JC into that fourth industrial revolution. And so I think that there's a shrinkage that's going on. And because of the I guess because of the normalization and the uses of technology that we've grown up with. Now, actually, there's a great meme. African parents are never so humble than when they're asking you to help them out with technology. You can even go and ask them to, you can even send them to go and fetch you a glass of water. So definitely, there's definitely, I think this is definitely shifting the ways that we have to interact with each other, and it's quite sudden. So yeah, that's super interesting. I think, but I do think that my characters are probably locked up in their rooms more often than not,
avoiding the parents.
Yeah, avoiding the parents, and trying to stop Nazi porn from invading their Zoom meetings.
You recently contributed to an anthology of writing around COVID and the lockdown. How was that experience?
That was pretty wild, because I knew as soon as it happened, or I could see that it was coming, that there were going to be all these pieces about it, and the think pieces that happened were going on long before lockdown,
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of isolated and just making my own thing, and I was trying not to think about it. And I was like, I really don't want to write a COVID piece. But then as soon as I got the opportunity, it just sort of ran out of me. And I try to have a little bit more fun with it. And my fun is very different to anyone else. Imagining sort of a coup attempt in Pretoria. And
which, to be honest, I think is a lot more realistic now than it was perhaps when you were writing it, because with all of this dissent, right? All these people saying they want to the government to do different things.
And they're burning cars in Cape Town. So yeah, like for me, the thing is there's very little that this minority can do to surprise me on any like huge level. So I think if I'm writing something that's the most ridiculous thing, that's actually quite. I'm always interested in how racialized people, how racialized the response to my stories are, because white people are generally like, "Come on, that would never happen," and black people are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, you could see that."
Yeah. Yes. I mean, so you wrote a piece for Pan Macmillan as well about that we're not getting to a new normal.
Yeah.
And, so many people, I mean, so much of that sort of resistance or the resist kind of movement stuff is people saying, no, we want to get back to normal.
Yeah.
But this idea of like, firstly, was the past normal, what is that really what we want to go back to?
Yeah. We were living in an abnormal society already.
Yeah. What's your sense of what will come from this and how things are going to change?
Just looking at how crazy the world is and how, being a Nazi is cool again, especially over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Who knew that it would be cool again to become a Nazi?
Yeah.
The only thing that I can say right now, and it might sound super esoteric, is now more than ever, I think Biko's words apply. The greatest gift that Africa shall bestow upon the world is a more human face. And I'm just hoping that this is that reality that, we cannot do this alone, guys.
Yes.
It's just impossible. And that like this is what we need to do to survive.
Yes. But also this idea that you need that humanity matters and humans come first, right?
Yeah.
And that all of these other systems that we have in place can't exist without humans.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this whole economy argument has not made sense to me at all. They're like, what about the economy? But you need people for the economy, bro. Like, do you think the economy is something that you plant into a pot plant and then and you watch it grow? Like, people need to be able to live. You need to be alive to enjoy this economy.
Yeah.
And also calling for a genocide is definitely not the way to to go about fixing it.
Exactly. There's a comment here from someone that I think is someone's mom, who's like, in response to your comment about the technology, so true, we have to be humble in order for you guys to impart that technological knowledge that we are naive about. Which is, thanks.
As you need a glass of water.
One of the kind of trite things that people have been saying around this is that it's revealing inequality, the inequality's always been there.
Yeah.
It's just that some people are noticing it over others. And that's one of the tensions that I found really interesting in your book is one of the early scenes when they are at Sammy Marks Square. And when Tabi Singh is there, and the kind of the recognition of how different her life is as a middle-class Black person to everyone who is participating in that. And, I do think that kind of inequality amongst Black people is going to be the conversation of our next however many years, that the last 26 years of freedom have brought progress and freedom to some, but not uniformly. And it's unsustainable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's also the other thing I think that I've found super interesting about this whole sort of economy, whatever, conversation and inequality conversation is that as a Black person looking at COVID-19, its effects, and what could happen, your proximity to people who are going to be affected by it is so much closer than anyone else. So you know that you've got family that is quite vulnerable and exposed to this. So you don't have to imagine these like crazy scenarios. That anxiety is already within you. And so I think, just even that idea of healthcare, I think is definitely going to magnify the way in which we have to start grappling with these ideas, because I mean it's such a basic fundamental, but it's not there.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the kind of disappointment of the last 26 years, right? Is how much it's been a struggle to get the fundamentals in place. But certainly speaking to friends in like Latin America, my friends who live in Mexico or Brazil, they're facing exactly the same issues.
Yeah.
In terms of access.
Yeah. And I think that's also the global thing, right? So that we're not just looking at these polarized racial ideas. Now we have to look at anti-Blackness and the hierarchy within that and how that has manifested.
As we start wrapping up, I want to ask you, what next, right? So you've achieved this great achievement with this book. Oh, there's a question, one more question, and then we'll wrap up. Andile says he'd like to hear your thoughts on the role of digital media in speeding up a generational divide between the born frees in the book and those younger than them who are natural digital natives in many ways. The younger generation have new tools to navigate their world, but I wonder if these tools have brought some distance between groups of people born in the same decade. So yeah, I mean, if you're born in 1990, your experience of the world and the tools that you're familiar with is very different to someone born in 1998 or 1999.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Is this whole, is media increasing that divide?
Yeah, I think I can't see. So I think definitely if we're looking at different sort of levels of societal interaction and access to technology, I mean that divide is constantly growing.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at sort of people who have the same who have access to technologies, but some are getting older, I think that's also kind of shrinking. I mean, you guys had CDs and we had MP3s, so that and so that fluency is I think is becoming is increasing in terms of its fluidity. But I do think that is going to be a super interesting sort of conversation. The TikTok versus Twitter generation.
Yes, TikTok. I'm not even trying. Like I've not even tried.
I tried and I was told, Chief, this is not Instagram. So cool.
There's a question here from Nancy about that in your acknowledgements in Freeloaders, you talk about harping on about this book forever. Why did it take so long to come to fruition, and did it change very much along the way?
I'm actually glad it took so long to come to fruition. I started working on it when I was 21 or 22. can you imagine the mess that this book would have been?
Disaster. Disaster. Thank goodness you didn't write it then.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot
It would be so
imagine.
angsty.
It would be so angsty, but can you imagine the dragging that I would, like the post-publishing drag I would be getting on Twitter, having published that mess? It definitely wouldn't have had enough jargon. So yeah, so I'm glad it actually took a while, and I think I just needed to be a better writer to actually get my head around it, because I kept on being like, yo, I'm going to do this novel, and I'm going to do this novel, and the fatuous state of severity gave me gave me the confidence to actually go ahead and write the novel, and to put my ego aside to be able to listen to editors and to put it together. Has it changed a lot? I definitely think it's been given a lot more tact.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it's been cool. Yeah, there are some scenes I wish that I could have put back in there, but but like they say, kill your darlings.
And what next? What are you working on now? Is it a novel? Is there?
So yes, I mean, I am working. Yeah, there's always going to be another book that I'll be working on. So that's starting to come together. That's starting to come out of me, and I'm starting to obsess over it a little bit.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm hopefully I'll be doing a virtual reality project in the next about month that I can share with you guys.
Fantastic.
And yeah, I'm just I'm writing short stories. They keep on coming out of me, and I'll be creating a few videos. So yeah, just trying to make stuff, just trying to keep it moving.
So living a life of a writer, have you had to develop like a new routine because of COVID?
My mom was like, "When Amos, this is nothing new. This is you every day." And I'm like, yeah, welcome.
No going into the office for you. You're just keeping on.
Exactly. You wake up when you want to. And it's winter, so like I usually hibernate now. So I've been like, all right, cool. Welcome, guys.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Having this conversation. Thanks everyone who's joined us, for taking your lunch break to be with us today. Eileen has posted in the chat the links to buy the book, Born Freeloaders. You can get your copy from Exclusive Books. You can order it there, or you can get the ebook on Kindle from the Amazon site. Yeah, and I am so looking forward to having more of these conversations with you. Thank you, Phumlani, for being here and for chatting with us. And thank you for writing. It's wonderful and telling our stories, which is great.
Thank you so much for being down to have this conversation. It's always, I mean, it's always fun to chop it up, I mean, obviously with it's always better when we have wine and beer. But right now, June. I will take hugging you across the screen. Oh yeah, Exclusive Books is on Uber Eats.
Exclusive Books is on Uber Eats, so you can order your book and get it sent with your takeaway. So that's awesome. All right. Cheers, guys.
All right. Thank you so much, dear.
Bye.
Bye.